It was a big weekend for more than a dozen Democratic presidential hopefuls. They all gathered in San Francisco for California's Democratic Convention.
But the current frontrunner, former Vice President Joe Biden, had a different plan. He spent the weekend campaigning in Ohio, opening himself up to criticism from his rivals like Senator Bernie Sanders.
All of us are united in defeating Trump, but let me be frank with you and raise the issue that I think is on everyone's mind, and that is, what is the best way to defeat Trump? As you all know, there is a debate among presidential candidates who have spoken to you here in this room and those who have chosen, for whatever reason, not to be in this room. About the best way forward.
Interesting. For a closer look at how the weekend unfolded, we're joined by CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. So why did the unmentioned person choose to not be in that room?
Because he maintains such a wide lead, Don, that his camp continues to believe that they can sort of dance to a different drummer and do their own thing. And the fact that he was speaking to a human rights campaign dinner in Columbus, Ohio, with what some of his folks say was a long scheduled appearance, is a sign that he thinks that he didn't have to necessarily associate himself with those that are trailing far behind him this weekend in California, a state that is for the first time holding its primary on Super Tuesday and therefore has a much larger say early on in who ultimately would be the Democratic nominee for president.
So, Ed, it's pretty early in the campaign. Explain to our audience why candidates are choosing to spend some time in California compared to past elections.
Right. So, as I just mentioned there, you have Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina always go first. They will go first again in 2020. But then on March 3rd, Super Tuesday, you're going to have a handful of states, including California and Texas, essentially going fifth. California usually has held its presidential campaign in June, and it has the largest prize, 495 delegates. So by moving up into March, they now have an outsized say, essentially, in who is going to be the nominee, or who at least continues to play in the process of getting to the nomination, because they, like every other state, will proportionally divide up their delegates, most of them. And so there's a chance for somebody to campaign, say, just in Northern California, and maybe get a few dozen there, or to focus on the Los Angeles region and Orange County and scoop up a bunch from that part of the state, depending on how well they do in each of the 53 congressional districts. So there's an incentive for those that can afford to do it, both with their time and money, to be there. Biden maintains a wide lead in early surveys, so his team figured he didn't need to be there. But folks like Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren see real opportunities for themselves, especially if they're surviving after those first four primaries.
Well, there's also a lot of donor cash for Democratic candidates in California.
There is, and this is the difference. Normally they would go out there just for money, and certainly everyone who came to San Francisco over the weekend did some of that. The difference this time is now they also have to find volunteers to help them win votes. And normally California, when it comes to votes, is an afterthought because they're so late in the process and they're so reliably Democratic anyway. But now, by being earlier, there's a chance for certain people to really carve out parts of the state and win some delegates if they can do it. And I, over and over again, with the Democrats who we spoke to from San Diego, from San Francisco, from Northern California, they are over the moon about the fact that they now actually might get some of that attention that Iowans and New Hampshire residents and South Carolinians get, because they say, look, you know, we're normally just the ATM. Now They actually have to come look for our votes.
But those donations are crucial on another issue, and that is to get into the debates, they have to have a certain number of unique donors, and so they're obviously fishing around for that because there's so many people running right now.
Absolutely. That is a big factor. You have to now, the threshold for the first debates has basically been met by most of the field. You needed to find 65,000 donors in at least 20 states. But for September, you now got to find 130,000 in 20 states. In each of those 20 states, you got to have at least 400 people giving to you. Much higher bar that many of these folks aren't necessarily going to be able to meet. So yes, spending time in California and all these other places helps them find votes and financial support.
Ed, you also had an opportunity to speak to former Obama cabinet member Julián Castro over the weekend. He's planning a big announcement today. What more can you tell us?
It's a plan to revamp how the nation's police forces essentially do their job, an attempt at essentially imposing some federal standards to local policing. We spoke about it at length on Saturday night in San Francisco. I think we have a piece of it that we might as well just play for people.
I've proposed ending over-aggressive policing by doing things like putting an end to stop and frisk and racial profiling, by making sure that we demilitarize our police. I've also called for things like a national use of force standard, which says that you can only use force if there's an imminent threat to life and all other reasonable alternatives have been exhausted. And holding communities accountable for use of force. If there's excessive force, I believe that a police officer should be held accountable and that we should track excessive use of force, because we really don't right now.
All right, Ed, thanks very much. And we look forward to that. For more of Ed's conversation with Julián Castro, stream Red and Blue tonight at 5 Eastern. Castro says President Trump's trade war with China is, quote, grade A stupid. He's going to tell us why.
He's going to tell us why, yeah.